Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good evening, Rush Nation. It's Monday. We're back for another flagship. Apologies for last week. So I learned, and I shared this with Lewis, that most home insurance policies in the country, and this is our public service announcement, as you will, are invalidated if you declare on social media or on a podcast or some form of broadcast that you are going on holiday. And I'm a stickler for details, as you probably are aware. So thus did not announce I was going on holiday for that very reason. And Dan, unfortunately, ran into a few issues, and he's not here tonight. He's still got some technical issues with internet and that. So I've drafted Lewis in. So apologies, there was no show last week. And apologies to the radio side. So if you do follow me on Twitter, you would have heard on Sunday when I was back that I was on holiday. Wasn't anything to I think a few people sent some messages to you, Lou, didn't they, saying where I was or what I was up to. But I was just reconnecting with my family and making sure that the boy and us as a family had some time to connect. It was pretty crap summer. We didn't really get away due to injuries and illness. So yeah, good to recharge, good to be back, and good to watch some what was a very strange week in the NFL. But joined tonight with me is Lewis. Lewis, welcome to the flagship. How are you doing, my friend?
I am very well. It wasn't just a strange week. I think it's been a strange season so far. On top of a mountain of injuries and everything else, some surprise teams. There's Jack, look, 5-1, baby. The Giants are definitely one of them. It's just been a bit of a strange season through 6 weeks, I think.
Yeah, very strange season for sure. And all in all, just I've been trying to do some digging in as to try and understand some of it. And gonna have an article going out on 5 Yard at some point this week about running backs. And that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to tease it too much, but it is interesting to see that. Normally, you'd expect offenses to start slow. We're still not really seeing too many of these offenses sort of kick in. And then some of the offenses we thought would be good have not been good. And then you've got what we've just been hearing about in the last few minutes with regards to the Arizona Cardinals. So the Arizona Cardinals have traded for and acquired Robbie Anderson from the Panthers. I'm not too sure what the compensation is. I imagine it will be a very late pick, given that Robbie Anderson was on quite a fair wage in terms of salary. It was quite a big salary, 15-16 million. And then it's transpired that move has happened because Marquise Hollywood-Brown appears to have suffered a season-ending injury. So he effectively comes in as a like-for-like replacement for the man they traded a first-round pick for in order to acquire him this summer. So, and the Cardinals have been one of those teams that have just been pretty dismal on offense really this season. So how do you think that trade kind of shapes down and what you expect of the Cardinals going forward? Do you think they, with Anderson, have got a suitable replacement or?
Hollywood has certainly started off quite well compared to what I expected anyway. Before this week, I think he was like the wide receiver 7 or 8, something like that. Don't have it in front of me right now because obviously it's last minute news, but he had started quite well, obviously with Hopkins coming back as well. It's a like-for-like replacement, but I can't see Anderson making too much of a difference. Kyler Murray has to get something going, and this weekend was a prime example of Arizona's troubles, I think.
It's a strange one because they do actually lead the league in a number of offensive plays made. So running a high number of plays per game. It's over 77 plays per game. So you would think that with the players that they've got, that they would be doing more in the sense of from an offensive perspective, but they just seem to not be able to get, as you said, Marcus Hollywood-Brown, PPR, wide receiver 5 on the year. But even so, it's not even a, he's not, he's been fine, but he's not necessarily been sort of a standout player. It's more volume. Nuke Hopkins comes back this week. We'd expect that offense to potentially improve, but it's just a strange one. Like they've not really hit the ground running, and they're not alone. There's quite a number of teams. We're going to get through a few of them, but I do think with Anderson, it's a double-edged sword. At the end of the day, Cliff Kingsbury and Arizona are in trouble because they were predicted to make the playoffs. They need some progression. They've paid Kyler Murray an awful lot of money to play quarterback, and it's not working. And Cliff Kingsbury for me is arguably one of the worst offensive play callers in the NFL. His offense is very college style. It's very stale. It's a lot of 11 personnel, a lot of short yardage passing. It's very unexciting. It's very unattractive, and it's kind of like it's like a poor man's Sean McVay offense, where Sean McVay is coming in and he's playing the short yardage game, but the way that he schemes blockers, and similar to Kyle Shanahan, the way that they scheme these short plays is so that they enable the running lanes and the channels so that a short pass turns into a 20, 30-yard gain. That's what Cooper Kupp did ever so successfully last season. Very similar to the foundations that have built, the successful teams that we've seen who play that sort of West Coast offense, short yardage for long street games. Kyle Shanahan with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk, for example. Cliff Kingsbury's just forgetting about that second part, and he's like, well, we'll just play 7-8 yard passes, and if we just do that down the field, we'll be fine. The problem with that is their quarterback is, and this is where the height issue comes in, because of the fact that he's not able to gain enough protection. He wheels around and he's ended up having to make a lot of plays on the run, but because he can't see the whole field, it's a very difficult offense to run when you're not 6'2" plus, because the spread offense, you need to see the whole field, and he can't because he's not tall enough. So it's a really it's a mismatched offense that doesn't suit to Kyler Murray's skill set. It doesn't suit to effectively the players in that offense. The only player that benefits from this offense is Zach Ertz. Really the only, and James Conner maybe, but no one else does. And so Cliff Kingsbury's he's on the hot seat here because they need to get into the playoffs, get beyond the first round of the playoffs. They've traded their first round pick for Marcus Brown. All right, he's got hurt. He's done all right, but they need to kick on. They've paid all this money to Kyler Murray, and I'm not sure if Robbie Anderson is going to be quite enough, especially given that he is a bit of a negative character. He does come with some challenges. Just this weekend, he squared up to former Arizona head coach Steve Wilkes, who's now the interim at Carolina, and has squared up to him on multiple occasions, and that's the end of his career. And in fact, he's got what he's wanted. You've ended up rewarding him because he didn't want to be there. You don't want to be on a team that's losing every week. So I don't know.
No, I mean, like some things he was throwing around on social media before the season, Robbie Anderson as well. You can see he did not want to be there with Carolina. But going back to Cliff Kingsbury, just quickly, like you say about, he's very simple. People have him worked out. Opposing head coaches have him worked out weeks before they're due to play Arizona. And with their defense not stepping up like they are, that's why fantasy managers and stuff that have drafted these players with high draft picks and things like that, the James Conner, Kyler Murray and that's why they're taking the hit, because they're expecting all these things, but it's just very easy to work out. It's almost like you know what you're getting from Arizona before you're due to play them. Like,
yeah,
I really think there's a lot more to it from the naked eye than there is from breaking down stats and things like that with Arizona.
Yeah, and what goes beyond that as well is just when they've got down into the red zone, they haven't been overly efficient, and it's because it's, as you say, it's very one-dimensional. If they get down into the red zone, the ball goes to Zach Ertz. It's a very traditional offense they run, and so it's a pretty easy offense to defend against because Zach Ertz had 11 red zone targets. He's completed 4 of those for 2 touchdowns. Like, it's not a great efficiency metric, because what you do when you've got Arizona inside the 15, It's very simple. You drop back a little bit. You put extra men back on the defensive line, in the defensive back position, and you make sure that you've got the run of Ertz covered, but then you make sure you've dropped an extra player back to help the safety, and then you just make sure that there's coverage there, so you know roughly where Ertz is going to go. He's not going to charge to either pylon. He's going to dominate that middle of the field. So you drop an extra player back to help the safety. Or you start with an extra safety, maybe play 3. And then all of a sudden, you've got that area covered, and that's where they're not converting. And there's a couple of offenses very, very similar. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, very, very similar, have those challenges. We'll get onto them later on. Let's say you take that read away. So the next read's going to be Marquise Brown. So again, he's had 6 red zone targets. He's completed 1. Again, very simple. He's going to dominate whatever side the outside he's on. So again, you put coverage there. And the only play that they can make in the red zone is Kyler Murray with his feet, which is why you just see it now. Kyler Murray's just running around the loop because they're like, do you know what? If Kyler Murray can beat the 7 or 8 men he's going to have to beat to score a touchdown, then hats off to him, he can have the points. Because they've just schemed it now, teams, against Arizona. It's like, we're going to let Kyler beat us. And if he does, fair play to him. Like, we'll shake his hand at the end of it. But we're not going to, because we know the ball's going to go to Ertz in the red zone. We know it's going to go to Brown. It's not going to go anywhere else. So it's a very simple offense to cover against. You cover the screen, you cover the short passes, you bring up the DBs as much as possible, and you effectively blitz and you press, and you do that to force Kyler to make the throws. Now, he has not been as good as he normally is, Kyler Murray. You look at last season where he was potentially an MVP candidate very early on. And you look at where he is now, he's not there, but it's not on Kyler Murray. He is not playing to the strengths that he has, and this coach is not playing to his strengths. It's not a good match. And I think it would not shock me that Cliff Kingsbury was sacked at the end of this season. It just wouldn't shock me because they're not going to challenge. They're not going to challenge for the NFC. They're just not. They might squeak into the playoffs because the NFC is that bad. But they're not going to go very far. They're not going to. They're not a team that Philadelphia, Dallas. You could talk about the Giants. The Giants aren't going to fear them. Bucks aren't going to fear them. No one's going to fear them. No one with a half decent defense is not going to fear the Arizona Cardinals. And when you don't have that fear, you've got no chance.
No, absolutely not. Not by that time of the year when even new defenses, like with the Vikings, a team I follow, with a new defensive coordinator, new personnel on defense, but once they've played 17 matches, they're more than gelled. They're not going to be worried about the Cardinals. And after watching them for a whole year, knowing what they're going to do, it's all on Hopkins when he comes back, to be fair. But should we dive into week 6 a little bit?
Yeah.
Tell us a few bits that surprised you, mate.
I mean, there are a few things. One was Robbie Anderson, right, having the altercation. So we've talked about that. I was surprised that after what happened with Antonio Brown last season, I'm surprised that a player thought that they could challenge a coach and win. Like, I just think it's only going to go one way. And like I said, maybe that's what he wanted. He's got what he wanted. He's got moved to a better team without having to take a pay cut. Everything worked out for Robbie Anderson. So maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe, we're not giving him enough credit. I think for me...
I'm a little bit upset that he never had the shirt off and he was running around cheering up all the fans, to be honest. Done a proper AB, but it was close enough, weren't it?
Yeah, I mean, you can't have multiple digs. And listen, we know Steve Wilkes isn't an NFL coach. He's had that audition. He failed miserably as a one and done in Arizona. So we know that he's not good enough. But at the same point, you've got to respect the process. And for me, it's an interesting one because it now looks like Carolina are in a full-blown tank. They look like they're going to trade Christian McCaffrey if they can get that deal done. And to be honest, that's a wise move. If I was sitting here as the GM of the Carolina Panthers, that's exactly what I would do. I would move on Christian McCaffrey because he's got about 1, maybe 2 years left at the peak, and you've got an excellent young defense, but your offense is shot. You're not going to be winning it in the next 2 years. So get what you can, get your king's ransom. It's almost like playing dynasty fantasy football. Trade him now while he's worth something to a team that's going to contend. There's half a dozen teams right now that will benefit from having Christian McCaffrey and be a much better football team as a result. So it's clear that they're going to tank. They're going to trade him. They traded Robbie Anderson. They've got that big contract off the books, which is good. They haven't got a quarterback that's good enough to compete. It wouldn't shock me if they shop DJ Moore, to be honest.
No.
But we'll see what happens. But they haven't got enough pieces to contend. So why not trade them all in? And the reason I also go into why I think they're in a tank. We all knew that Matt Rule was on the hot seat from the get-go. We knew that he had, I think I said it in the preseason, he had 4 to 6 games to save his job. He went in the middle of that, right? Not shocked he got fired. If you were that serious about this season, you'd have a coach lined up. This would have been done in the summer. You'd have prepped someone and gone, hey, just to let you know, if we get rid of Matt Rule, because it's not exactly a secret that he's on playing for his job, if things don't start the way that we expect, we're going to come knock on your door and we're going to have something prepared, because you want to prep. There's head coaches out there who could warrant a job right now, and they didn't do that. Because you got Steve Wilkes there Sunday. I expect Steve Wilkes to remain there for the rest of the season. That says to me, we're going to tank, but it's not the smart thing if you're going to tank, because you've got a coach who is incentivized to win, because Steve Wilkes is playing for another head coaching job. He's going to try and win. So the only way you can really successfully tank is to get rid of all the star players. And that's what I think they're going to do, and just say to Steve, look, results are results. Do what you can. Don't worry about it. Put yourself in the window for next year to be the head coach. But I think the smarter thing I would do if I was Carolina GM is I would hire a coach and say, look, just do what you can this year. Don't worry about it. We're just going to rebuild from scratch. But it's probably not an attractive job right now. We'll see what happens. But that shocked me a little bit with what happened. Kenyon Drake being as efficient as he was. Now, J.K. Dobbins got hurt, left the game, which is frustrating if you own J.K. Dobbins, because you've waited all this time for him to come back, and hopefully it's not that serious. But 119 yards off just 10 carries is quite impressive. And I had a few people who had some bets on, I can't remember who it was, but they bet on somebody to be the leading, I think it's Breece Hall to be the leading rusher in football yesterday across the slate of games. And he was second behind Kenyon Drake, and that annoyed a lot of people. But it also shows you the state of the rushing game right now, that Kenyon Drake is the number 1 rusher in the week with 10 carries and 119 yards. We're used to running backs putting up 140, 150, 160 yard performances, and it didn't really happen yesterday. So that it shocked me that he was as efficient, because he's been not overly active. He's not shown any real signs of gelling with that offense and breaking these big runs. So that's interesting, especially now Gus Edwards potentially comes back next week or the week after. And then David Njoku's role shrinking significantly. I was a bit surprised to see his decline. And there's some reasons for that. We'll get into it, but that kind of shocked me. Well, what about you, mate? What were some of the things that you think sort of stood out for you in week 6?
Yeah, I mean, the Kenyon Drake performance is what we wanted when we drafted him in the first round in 2020, right? But the big one for me, and it's because obviously I watched the game a lot more closely than some of the others, but it's how well and how QB proof it seems that Tyreek especially, and even Jalen Waddle are. So Tyreek obviously had 42 points in PPR in week 2 with Tua, but then 29.7 yesterday with a mix of the rookie and Skylar Thompson and Teddy Bridgewater. He's a wide receiver 6 so far on the season in PPR, but a lot of people were fading him in the offseason because he didn't have Patrick Mahomes no more. He didn't have that other, with Travis Kelce, who takes a lot away from Tyreek as well, like that elite talent. And Waddle, he is fitted in perfectly with him. He had 40 points in week 2 with Tua, but I think him more than Tyreek could do with having Tua back. But he still put up nearly 17 yesterday in PPR after a couple of off weeks kind of thing. But I think he was carrying a little bit of a knock as well. But yeah, just that Dolphins offense could be a bit scary. Even Mostert's doing a few bits here and there. I think it helps with obviously Mike McDaniel there. But yeah, just how well Tyreek has done and how QB proof he is. And then Deion Jackson. Now, go on, carry on.
No, I was going to say, like, I see what you mean with Tariq. I wouldn't go as far as say he's QB proof. I mean, like, it's a good performance yesterday, but they're very narrow tree. Like, if you look at the Dolphins, it's a very easy fantasy offense to work out now. It's literally ignore everybody except for Tua when he's back is a low end. Well, he's probably a high end QB2. Then they've almost turned into, I'm trying to think of a really good comparison, sort of the Colts of a couple of years ago, where you play the quarterback on a situational basis. You've got the two wide receivers there in Hill and Waddle, who both of them have wide receiver one upside every single week because they're going to be fed and force fed a ton of volume. And then Raheem Mostert's a low end RB2, RB3 play, and you can ignore absolutely everybody else in that offense. And I think they benefit from the fact there's not a lot of competition for targets or a lot of competition for basically for offense. And I think they are proof that opportunity and volume just means so much more than talent. Because I'm not saying they're not talented players, but the one thing that people were worried about with Waddle when Tyreek came was the volume. And the one thing that's maintained is the volume. So, yeah, I mean, I think any player could potentially be QB proof if they get the kind of volume that Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle get. That's my kind of one take on it. I'm not necessarily, and this isn't an anti-Dolphins tribe. You good with all your best players. It's not a difficult game really. They're just doing what they should be doing, which is, Tyreek Hill got 15 targets yesterday with 12 receptions. I mean, that's just bonkers in terms of usage. He's not going to get that kind of volume every week, but check down Teddy that's kind of what he does best. But they also, you got to remember, they lost the game. Ultimately, it doesn't matter for fantasy, but if they're going to keep losing games at the rate that they are, they did only put up 16 points and did struggle to move the ball. A lot of it's penalties and discipline. There's a lot of players in that team that are struggling right now. I mean, they had a drive where they had a 1st and 30, then they went to 3rd and 34. I mean, it was just bonkers. So, I see your point, but I wouldn't say they're necessarily sort of QB proof. I just think if they're getting that kind of volume that they were yesterday, I mean, you're just looking at what they did between them and who else is getting that kind of who's getting the ball in that offense. It's really only 3 players. And it's actually similar, like I said, to the Vikings of a couple of years ago and a few other players. But because if you look at the targets, like yesterday, you've got receiving. So you got Tyreek Hill, 15 targets, Jalen Waddle, 10. There are only 30 completions. There were 47. So 25 of the 47 went to those 2 players. And then Mike Gesicki weirdly got 7 targets and 2 touchdowns, which annoyed me as someone who drafted quite a bit of Gesicki and then dropped him everywhere. But then, you've got, River Crancraft got 1, and to be honest, never heard of him. Tanner Connor got 2 targets. It really is just everything's going through those 2 guys. And then you said when he's getting 14, 15 carries. If he can get himself some additional targets, he becomes a decent sort of RB2 volume player every week.
Yeah, so the reason why I wasn't worried about Tyreek, like how some people was with Waddle there, and then people was worried about Waddle because Tyreek was coming, is pretty much because of that. Like, and then they was worried about that it's Tua that's the quarterback and things, but they're there, they've got the volume, and they're both good enough to break off them huge runs. Obviously, Tyreek after the catch, he's unbelievable, probably one of the best in the league. But yeah, I just think I think they're good for the rest of this year, next year when we get there and all that. But Deion Jackson was my second one. 28.1 PPR points in week 6 as the lead back. Now, in week 5, he had 91 scrimmage yards, which went very under my radar, at least. I don't know if you picked up on that but yesterday he caught the ball 10 times for 79 yards. So he's a legit pass catcher. I say it a lot, but with PPR, points mean prizes. If you got someone catching the ball, especially out the backfield, you're laughing. You know, you got like the Austin Ecklers, Leonard Fournette, CMC. They can use their hands out the backfield, catch a shed load of passes, and he's another one of them. Now, the thing for the rest of the season, if Nyheim Hines come back, he may not have a role when Jonathan Taylor's there as the lead back. How well Deion Jackson was as a pass catcher yesterday, especially. That's where I'm at with Deion Jackson. He really impressed me yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely some interesting things with Jackson. You know, as you said, 10 targets. Wouldn't expect that too much from a player in the backfield, especially with an offense that's struggling like the Colts have been, but they seem to have come alive. I think with a couple of things I would say about yesterday's performance when looking at the running backs, especially Deion Jackson, is first of all the Jags very good in pass coverage this season. So have given up a few up the middle, and as a result, you know, I thought it was good coaching there from Frank Reich to identify weakness and really hammer it. And I think on top of that, I think just in terms of, it was interesting because Paris Campbell got a significant amount of workload. They spread it across a lot of guys. I think I can't remember. I mean, like, how many did he throw? I mean, Matt Ryan, he threw the ball 58 times yesterday. Like, I think game script really comes into it here because they were behind like 2 touchdowns early. They fought back, and, you know, credit to them, they got the win. But I don't think you'll see Matt Ryan throwing the ball 58 times. But as you said, it's now interesting to see, does he get that role from Nyheim Hines? That's one to watch, to see if they do more at that backfield and start using that. And maybe that's a sign to give the ball to Jonathan Taylor more, because they've not been very good at feeding him as much as they should have done. But yeah, great performance from Jackson, great performance and great comeback from the Colts yesterday. Be interesting to see what happens going forward, whether or not they incorporate Jackson more, and this is the end of Hines, or is Hines going to come back and this is going to be sort of Jackson's day in the sun. I guess we'll find out.
Because it was 2020 when I think Hines finished as the like PPR RB15 or something like that. Taylor's was the year, and I'm sure it was 15 or 14 he finished on the year. But like, if Jackson has that sort of usage how he had yesterday, because it's very efficient with it as well. Obviously, like 7.9 yards per catch is good from the backfield. Like, I mean, but shall we move on to the next part? So, like, what have you learned from week 6? What is something that you know now going forward, what to expect?
Yeah, so there's a few things here, and what we're trying to do is work out why potentially good offenses aren't doing very well, right? So one of the big things for me right now is looking at Aaron Rodgers. And then, you know, I was having this with Liam yesterday, saying, you know, I'm a bit worried about his arm. Saw him in London, didn't think the arm strength was anywhere near where it used to be. Definitely underthrowing players. Liam was saying to me that it was more, yesterday was more the finger. And that might be the case, but actually Rodgers has heavily regressed. And part of that is going to be, you know, he doesn't have Devontae Adams, so that's quite natural. But actually, it's just down to Rodgers as a player, right? So his passer rating over 20 yards is genuinely dreadful. Like, it's awful. So when he's passing sort of to over 20 yards to the left-hand side, his passer rating is 24.1. Now, the league average is, and for that throw, is 78.4. So he is 54 points below the league average passer rating for throwing 20 yards or more to the left-hand side. Over the middle, he's slightly better. He's 39.6. League average is 86.2. So again, you're still looking at he's almost 50 points off the pace of just the average QB. And then to the right, he's better still, 51.3 to 70.8. And so trying to understand where Green Bay, what they're trying to do, Matt LaFleur and everybody, and when we're trying to understand what they're attempting to do, ultimately the throws have not been there. Rodgers isn't making them. A lot of incompletions. He's only completed, when we talk about deep passes, so this is passes over 15 yards, he's only made 13 completions over 15 yards this season, out of 45. So 13 out of 45 is not a great percentage to be working from to begin with, but they're high, they're low percentage throws, so it's lower than average, but it's not necessarily alarming. It's more the volume and the fact of the lack of completions, the lack of attempts. Seeing that kind of lack of attempts over 15 yards says to me that internally they know that there's throws that Aaron Rodgers cannot make anymore. And they're trying to adapt on the fly, as opposed to being fully prepared for this. And then you have this diminishing sort of talent core of wide receivers. And then it's just getting to the point of, I've learned now that you cannot really take a Packers wide receiver for really a guaranteed finish. Like, with all the injuries right now, it's quite easy to slot Alan Lazard in your lineup. It's quite easy to slot Romeo Doubs in your lineup. But actually, if everybody's fit and you've got Michael Thomas coming back, you've got Keenan Allen coming back, and you're playing these start-sit decisions, and Alan Lazard's in that conversation, he's going to fall down the wayside. And a lot of that is just down to a couple of factors. One, a lot of drops. They made 5 drops yesterday as a receiving core out of 34 catchable passes. That's not going to help. But then it's just in general things like yards per route run. So Devontae Adams last year had 2.8 yards per route run, which is a huge amount. He's doing an awful lot of work. And what he's doing there is he's pulling runners, he's testing the defense, he's stretching the D, and he's making plays. You're not expecting anyone to replicate Devontae Adams, because if you had that, then you'd be fine. But no one's necessarily expecting them to. But what they've done is effectively abandoned trying to replace him and just going, we're just going to put the ball in the middle of the field and hope that that's enough. So Alan Lazard, for example, 1.57 yards per route run. Romeo Doubs, 1.23 yards per route run. It just isn't going to get it done from a fantasy perspective. Those kind of numbers, you're relying on touchdowns in order for them to be significant fantasy relevant players. So I guess, that's something that I've learned and dug into, that if I have a wide receiver for Green Bay on my roster, I'm concerned. And the same goes for Russell Wilson. I'm concerned looking at his numbers. Now, I started digging into reasons why Russell Wilson potentially hasn't been good. It's very similar sort of story. I'm not saying his arm is gone, but there is a severe lack of continuity and connection with his receiving core. He's completed just 11 passes over 20 yards this season, with 2 TDs and 2 interceptions. Last season, over the last 5 games, those numbers were up around 15, 16 with 3 or 4 touchdowns and fewer interceptions. You're looking at, there's some things that are consistent, i.e. his time to throw is about the same behind the line. So you can't sit here and blame it. In fact, his time to throw is even longer this year, 2.83 seconds to 2.8 seconds. So we can't blame the offensive line for the struggles that Russell Wilson's having. It's purely he's not on the same page with the receiving core. And whether that's scheming, coaching, talent, could be a combination of all of them, to be perfectly honest with you. But his completed air yards have gone down significantly. But it's his expected completion percentage, and this is where it does lay a little bit on him. So last year, his expected completion percentage, completion percentage that was expected versus achieved, he was in a positive number, 0.2%. So it's not much, but basically he made the throws that he was supposed to make and completed them. And that's what that stat is telling you. This season, it's down at minus 6.3, which is a huge gap. Like, he's significantly off the pace. He's got one of the worst expected completion percentages in the NFL right now. And then that knockdown effect is, do I want to be playing Judy, Sutton? It's a hard one. Sutton, you probably will on volume, but you're more cautious about starting these players because that offense just isn't working right now. It's, you know you're not going to get those cheap touchdowns, the ones that make Amon, you're not going to get those ceiling plays. At the point now, you're looking at Cortland Sutton and the Jerry Jeudy as floor plays, not ceiling plays, because that offense isn't stretching the field. You're not getting those big plays. You're not getting those big touchdowns that you're getting from the Jags offense, or you're getting from the Detroit offense that are getting a ton of these big plays. And that's the concern, is when you're looking at these players and you're getting to your start sits, we're 6 weeks in. We should be seeing some progress. The fact that there's regression in both of these quarterbacks and both of their offenses, if you have a lot of these players, you're deeply concerned, and you should be, and you should now have to think about how you're going to relate this over the course of the season and think about course correction. For Green Bay, it's easier. You didn't pay that much for Lazard or Doubs or anyone else. It's very easy to move on. When you've forked out for Judy or Sutton and you've paid high draft picks, you've got to find a way to pivot away from relying on those numbers. So there's some things I've learned.
Just about to say, it's worse in Denver with the situation that Russ has than it is for Aaron Rodgers, even though they're both very similar at the moment because of the receiving core that Russ has in Denver. So he's gone from Seattle, where he's got Lockett and Metcalf and, a half-decent run game and whatever else, to Denver, who's Sutton and Judy, who are both still very talented wide receivers and an even better run game. Obviously, Javonte Williams has gone down and whatever else, but there's no reason. Well, there is a reason somewhere, but what is it why Russ ain't doing what he should be? And it's frustrating, to say the least.
Yeah, I think part of this is a bit of predictability in the play calling. So I've been looking at some stats to understand how Denver are lining up. So let's look at, for example, first down. So they line up under center about 2/3 of the time versus shotgun. That's not too bad. That's about par. On second down, it's 50-50, so it's good. That keeps you guessing. Are they going to pass? Are they going to run? And it's pretty balanced offense as a result. But on third down, they go in a shotgun almost all the time, almost exclusively, which is tipping the hand of the defense, really, because what they're doing is they're able to understand, well, if Russ is in shotgun, then we know he's going to pass the ball. And they pass the ball a lot on third down. So if I'm just looking down at their stats, I'm just pulling them up now. They pass on third down a huge amount. So they've 151. Oh, that's last season's. Excuse me. So Denver this season have passed the ball 55 times on third down. And then when you look at what they do when they run on third down, it is... Should have prepared this beforehand.
That's
just 9 times. 9
That's
times.
What I mean.
They've run the ball 9 times on third down. So it's telegraphing, like, if you're understanding as much as you can, like, I'm pulling these stats up on the fly. So I'm not even a defensive coach, and I can tell you that almost exclusively, because they're lining up in shotgun, they're passing the ball 70-80% of the time on third down. that makes it so much easier to defend if you're not going to bother trying to run the football. So it's those sorts of things that are hurting Russ. But Russ has got to make plays. He's got to make plays. He's not making plays, which isn't helping, but he's not being helped by his coaching staff. And we're starting to understand now, Nathaniel Hackett, has he got a job off the back of Aaron Rodgers in his prime, or is he actually an offensive genius? Jury's out. 6 weeks in, people are probably leaning towards the fact that he's probably more of a fraud than a success. And he hasn't got long, because if he doesn't solve this problem, and it's a battle between Russell Wilson or him, he's going to lose. Yeah. So it's you've got to look at it and think they need to get to the bye week. They need to get to the bye week quickly. They need to reset. They need to work out what they're going to do, because it's too predictable. It's too predictable what they're going to do. Defenses, they're tipping the hand to opposing defenses who are working out what they're doing. And until they start varying up the play calls, start varying up the offense, and start playing to similar to what we were talking about with Arizona, play to Russ's strengths, which is let him be a bit mobile, let him get away from the pocket, and let him be dangerous. Then we can start to see plays develop. But also Russ needs time with Sutton, with Judy. Judy, to me, is one of the best route runners in the NFL. If you look at the way that he runs routes, you saw it in college, he was a fantastic route runner. They need to incorporate and do that better. And they haven't. So really key that they start to understand to play to the strengths of the quarterback, of the wide receiver core. But Nathaniel Hackett's got to do a better job. So it's not all on Russ, even though Russ isn't making the plays. The play calling's tipping the hand of the D. And we know, and there's a few teams that are very similar right now, where we're not seeing RPOs, we're not seeing differences in the way that they're scheming. And it's very samey, which is why defenses are winning ultimately, which is what we're seeing, because they're seeing it on tape, as you said, and they're correlating it, and they know how to defend it. People know how to defend it, and they need to do something different. There's still plenty of time in the season, but they've got to do it quick.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little bit of everything in Denver at the minute, but give us one more while we're here.
Just to talk about coaching, right? So teams that have worked out. Cleveland. So we saw Cleveland. It wasn't the best result for Hunt and Chubb yesterday. So what we're seeing across the season now is that teams have basically gone, Jacoby Brissett's not going to pass the ball that often. We're not going to fear. The only way that the Browns are going to beat us is if they steamroll us with Chubb and Hunt. So what teams are doing now is they're stacking the box. They're playing 8 defenders in the box against Chubb and Hunt. They're seeing a stacked box 29% of their attempts, which is a huge amount. That's a huge amount to stack the box. Traditionally a running back would probably see in the region of about 15%. So you're seeing almost double the amount of time. And that's because teams just don't respect the pass, because it's Jacoby Brissett and Amari Cooper. And if they can shut that down, then happy days. So they're bringing more up. They're defending the run. Now, what that's resulting in is that Chubb and Hunt are 2 of the 3 backs in the NFL with the longest time behind scrimmage, which means it's taking them longer to get a play developed, and that is to cross through the line of scrimmage, because 1, they're receiving the ball so far behind the line of scrimmage so that they can see the hole and watch it develop, but 2, they need the offensive line to create the hole in order to create the space. It doesn't seem like it's all overly relevant, but a good running back should be running that time in around under 2 seconds on average. So their time behind the line of scrimmage is over 3 seconds, which again is down the fact that teams are defending the box, they're stacking the box, they're needing more time. What's going to happen now is that teams have got wise even more, not just stacking the box, but they're now going to bring pressure from the outside to try and get the tackles every which way they can. Because it's taking them so long on average to develop a play, because they're either receiving the ball so far behind the line of scrimmage or they're waiting for the hole to develop, you invite pressure from the corners, from the edge, and effectively they're going to be treated as quarterbacks, and they're going to be rushed a lot more. And we're starting to see this, and as a result of this, their efficiency and expected yards per attempt are crashing. because teams are wise to what's going on. So Chubb, for example, for the season after yesterday, his average yards per expected attempt were 1.97 yards. Yesterday, it was 0.05 yards. So he basically did what he was expected to do, and he's stopping that. They're stopping that efficiency. They're stopping those big gains, and basically the way to stifle the Browns is stack the box, make Jacoby Brissett throw the football, don't let them get to the red zone, and if you stop all of those things, they don't score any points, and that is what we're seeing. The Patriots are very wise to it yesterday, and other teams now have just seen how to beat the Browns. The Browns are a sitting duck, and they're effectively their season. It's another team we're talking about coaching. If you're an owner of Chubb right now, you're having to rely on him to be overly efficient, which is what we've seen. We've seen him be over efficient on yards per expected, over the yards per expected. So he's significantly outgained what he should have done. He's been overly efficient. Now those numbers are starting to trickle the other way, as we saw yesterday. And defenses that can stop the run and can stack the box and can stop that efficiency are going to stop this offense completely until Deshaun Watson plays. If you're a Nick Chubb owner, this is a concern because it's going to stop those big plays. It's going to stop those big runs. So we could be in a scenario where we've had the best days of Nick Chubb already. Having said that, you're probably not trading him because everyone else is so bad. And actually, Nick Chubb at 80% of what he was doing earlier in the season is still going to be a top 5 RB because the RB position is bad this year. So
absolutely. And like you say, with the efficiency and people working out Cleveland now, it brings me to someone at a different position, Christian Kirk. Now, he was saved by a touchdown yesterday, but that's 3 bad weeks on the trot he's had now. Is it... Now, yesterday, there's no excuse because Trevor Lawrence, he was back, he was firing. He put in a decent performance. The 2 weeks before that, he wasn't very good. So is it because Christian Kirk has been worked out and the Jaguars have been worked out now after them first 3 weeks where he was firing on all cylinders, scoring touchdowns, 100+ yards the first week, but he's still consistently playing over 90% of the snaps? But I think teams have worked out that route one in Jacksonville now in the passing game. So, like you say, with the coaching, it's going to be on Doug Pederson now to come up with something to get Christian Kirk rolling again the same way Stefanski's got to do it in Cleveland. He's got to get Brissett doing something different. They can't just wait for Deshaun to come back.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And he's not been helped because Zay Jones has been questionable, didn't play last week, did play this week. Jamal Agnew played, he's hurt. Marvin Jones hasn't played. And so it's really, really hard because Christian Kirk has been phenomenal, hasn't he? He's been really, really good this season. And it's really difficult because now he is really the only healthy, genuine threat in that offense when it comes to the receiving game. So it's as you say, it's pretty easy to defend. You put 2 on him and you say, you're banged up in the other positions, see what you can do. Evan Ingram's not doing anything. And they really need to think about what they're going to do. And actually, you would argue that maybe someone like Robbie Anderson might have been a better fit for the Jags than for the Cardinals, because I think he probably could have done something significantly more. That's not to say that they probably wouldn't think about bringing somebody in. But yeah, they do need to think about that, because if Marvin Jones is out for the long term or the medium term, and Agnew doesn't look like he's going to be back for a few weeks, so they are short at the wide receiver position, and they need someone out there. They need a healthy Zay Jones because he's been brilliant this season, and they need someone else out there. They need to run. They rely on a lot of that 11 personnel. As you say, he's playing a lot of snaps, but 5 targets yesterday because he's not getting open. And it's hard when he's the only healthy one. So need to, as you say, they need to be clever with how they scheme, but they actually just need bodies. They need bodies that are healthy who can actually do things. And Agnew looked like he was starting to progress and do well, and now he's going to be out for a period of time. Yeah, they need Marvin Jones. And Marvin Jones isn't going to be a big fantasy guy, but actually he's
Yeah.
the one that unlocks the potential for Christian Kirk to be that guy.
Oh,
Because
Christian Kirk, yeah.
if you look at the games in which both those players are played, this is Kirk's target numbers: 10, 6, 8, 9. Marvin Jones goes down before week 5, 3 targets in week 5, 5 targets yesterday. And that's because it's easy to defend, as we talked about. It's you put 2 on Kirk and you say, right, go to someone else.
Yeah. When
it's going to Etienne. It's going to Etienne. That's all it's
Yeah.
going to. It's going to Etienne, and it's going to maybe a couple of other players. But it's not. They're not. No one's scared. No one's scared of what's going on there because they're not. They're not Christian Kirk, and he's proven to be maybe not good value for money, but he's proved to be a very good signing, and everyone kind of scoffed at the money he got, but he started to repay that. But as you say, they need to do a bit more, and hopefully they get some guys healthy to start doing that. And fingers crossed that'll be sooner rather than later.
Absolutely, and Antonio Gibson, he's the only other one I wanted to talk about. For me, he is so close to being droppable now in redraft. His snap shares declined every week. His rushing attempts are really low now as well. He's not done anything in the receiving game since week 1. He even fielded a kick return yesterday, Murf. And with Brian Robinson emerging now, 17 carries in Thursday Night Football, 60 yards, and obviously his first touchdown. I didn't think it had happened so quickly after what happened in the offseason, but it's fantastic to see Robinson back so quickly as well.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, really good to see someone who suffered the way that he did to come back so quickly, which is really good. And yeah, as you say, for Antonio Gibson, it was interesting because in the press afterwards, they did say they need to utilize Gibson more. But as you say, his usage has been trending downwards and downwards every single week. Yeah, it's a strange one. I don't think he's necessarily droppable only because the rest of the position's quite bad, but he is definitely RB3 territory and maybe even lower because, as you say, he's just not doing anything now. Very, very few attempts on Thursday Night Football, 5 attempts, but he ran for 7 yards per attempt, which was quite good, really. Considering by far his best of the season, but yeah, needs to play more. I don't think it's going to be very good. He's not going to get the opportunities right now. The ideal scenario would be this: Brian Robinson keeps the role he's got. Antonio Gibson goes into that passing role, and JD McKissic gets kicked into touch. That's not going to happen. But that would be the ideal. Well, I think you got to hold. I think you got to hold Gibson, but you can't trade him. Like, you're just stuck now. But I'd hold him because you just never know what might happen. But yeah, as you say, he's not startable, at least for the next.
No,
at least the next couple of weeks.
He's very, very close to being droppable for me. That's what I was getting at. It's like he's almost on his last sort of string now. We'll see how Robinson's snaps and how many carries and stuff he gets and who gets used in the passing game. But let's have a look at any sort of statistical trends that we need to have a look at going forward. Let's start with the Green Bay Packers receivers. You mentioned Aaron Rodgers earlier.
Yeah, so I kind of talked about them already. I kind of wrapped the 2 into 1. So just the fact that at the moment, I don't think you can really trust these guys unless you are really sure at the receiver position with injuries. We're talking about 17 to 20 guys are on the injury report every single week. So, you might be in a scenario where you need to play Lazard and you need to play Dobbs, and that's fine. And if you're in those situations, then you have to do it. But if you've got an entire healthy core, I can't see where you can rely on either of these guys being starters in your fantasy teams, at least for the next the next few weeks, because of the fact that the yards per route run, the ADOT, everything that's all trending down. Aaron Rodgers not completing yards over 20, making completions over 20 yards. And the reason why that's important to someone like Lazard, because Lazard's the deep threat. He's the one with high ADOT. Yeah. His ADOT's over 13. So he's the deep threat. So if Aaron Rodgers is struggling to make the plays over 15, over 20 yards, and that's where Alan Lazard eats, it doesn't look good for Alan Lazard. For Romeo Dubs, who plays more in the intermediate, things look a bit fine, but you're relying on volume. Ultimately, this isn't looking like the most efficient offense. And they're a team that have been in decline in red zone and touchdown efficiency ever since that high watermark of 2020 because they were over efficient. They went too far the other way, and now we're starting to see some fallback. So, yeah, I just think if you've got a Packers receiver right now, if you can trade them off your roster for something interesting, I would be. But ultimately, they're not going to be plays on your fantasy lineup, barring injuries over the next few weeks.
So, just a quick one from a fantasy perspective: who would you like to see brought into Green Bay as a type of wide receiver? Like, obviously, DJ Moore looks like someone who could be traded for, or one of the free agent vets.
Honestly, no one. No one, because I don't want anyone good to go there because I don't want them ruined. There is a multitude of problems. One is, can we trust Aaron Rodgers' arm? He's not making the throws that he was making last season, the season before. Is it play calling? Is it play design? There's a whole multitude of things going on to where this offense just is not working. It's just not working. So, and I don't think bringing in talent is going to help them now. Not this season. If you brought DJ Moore into this offense, DJ Moore is going to be just as bad as Romeo. He's not going to be a step up on Romeo Dubs because Aaron Rodgers isn't making the plays. The coaching staff is not scheming to the best of their ability to get these guys open. And when that happens, I don't want anyone to go there. It's fine. If there's a veteran out there that's got a free agency contract, I don't think it's like it's so easy to say, well, Devontae Adams is gone. These guys aren't as good. Therefore, it's the wide receivers problem. I don't think they're bad wide receivers. I think Christian Watson is a very good player when healthy. I thought he was very good in college, excelled during the Senior Bowl, excelled during the draft process. And he's a guy who can make a lot of catches. And he catches a lot of those contested balls. Romeo Dubs has been a bit of a revelation. Alan Lazard has never been a bad player. You know, he's always been someone that's interested in fantasy players because he makes plays. But he's a deep threat guy. And when you've got Devontae Adams there who makes all the plays, it's always going to be who's the second guy. Yeah. And now they're looking for someone to step up. Ultimately, what they need is they need a playmaker who makes plays and someone who's going to do all the work like Devontae Adams was doing. And they need that more than ever. I don't think DJ Moore's that guy. I think there's maybe 5 guys in the NFL that maybe walk into that situation and elevate it back to 2021 levels. And for me, that's like Diggs, Evans, big contest guys who just maybe Tariq Hill because you could play him short, but these guys aren't going to go there. Like ultimately, So for me, a DJ Moore doesn't walk in and improve the situation, and that's not a slight on DJ Moore at all. I don't think DJ Moore adds anything to what they've already got. And I don't think anyone does, except for the elite level. I think what they need is an elite player, and there isn't one available. I think they needed to draft one. They needed to get one of these guys in the draft. They needed to get an Olave. They needed to get a Drake London. They needed to get a Garrett Wilson. That's what they needed to do. They needed one of those guys, and this was the year to do it, and they missed. And that has got to be a failure of Brian Gutekunst. That's got to be a failure of the front office for not being aggressive enough with their trades to go up and get. They had the picks to do it. They could have done it, but they didn't. And they're paying the price now. And it was the most glaring need. We all knew it. We all were expecting it. We were all expecting them to trade up to get their guy, and they didn't do it. And ultimately, they paid the price. Or they could have got AJ Brown. Didn't do that either. So
even all the way back in 2020 when they drafted Jordan Love, they could have done with someone behind Adams who could be brought on a little bit. But let's talk about Kenneth Walker because he looked good yesterday.
Kenneth Walker did look good, and people spent a lot of fab on him. I'm going to pour a bit of cold water here on Kenneth Walker, right? So this it all went well for Kenneth Walker yesterday, and he showed that he is ready for the opportunity. And I think all of that is absolutely fine. Look, he dominated. He outsnapped DJ Dallas. He dominated the early down work. But Kenneth Walker is not going to be a workhorse back, right? He's not going to be a workhorse back. So if you're sitting there looking at Kenneth Walker thinking, great, he's a 3-down back. He's never coming off the field because he's only competing with DJ Dallas and a few other guys. I'm sorry to tell you this, it's not going to happen. DJ Dallas was heavily involved in the short yardage work. He was pretty much 50-50 on the third down work, and he got all the 2-minute drill work. So 10-0. So in the 2-minute drill, which is quite a significant portion, especially for this kind of Seattle offense who are going to be behind in a lot of games and need to run those 2-minute drills. DJ Dallas getting all of that work, which is what we've kind of been seeing. I mean, Rashard Penny dominated all the phases, and Kenneth Walker hasn't done that. So that's a concern. It's one game, so we have to look at this in a isolation way. This could change next week. Walker could dominate all the snaps and dominate all the phases of play, but he isn't, and that's a concern because those 2-minute drills, third down work, they're the likely opportunities for touchdowns. So right now, DJ Dallas doesn't look like a bad guy to add off the waiver wire. He's someone that you should stash because if something happens to Walker, he's got an injury record, he was injured in camp, then Dallas definitely steps up into a bigger role for one. But two, he looks like he's going to be, if he can get himself efficient and he proves that efficiency on getting all of that 2-minute drill work and he's getting a lot of third down role, if he starts getting the goal line snaps, he almost becomes like the Jamal Williams of that offense. And it's almost like that's the guy you should own because it looks like Ken Walker's going to do all the dirty work. I'm not saying this is going to happen. Just from yesterday in the usage, there is a concern that Ken Walker is not going to get the touchdowns that everyone's kind of hoping he's going to get. And maybe DJ Dallas just creeping there in the wings. He's someone that I'd be putting in low bids for. Just little bits here and there just to see what happens. Because if the usage stays the same, DJ Dallas is the back I'd rather own because he's not going to have all of the usage that we would want, but he is going to have a very interesting role that's going to score fantasy points and might make him flex relevant over bye weeks. There's just been some breaking news from Mike Garafolo saying that Carson Wentz is going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks and they're considering putting him on injured reserve. So maybe Gibson maybe stays in play that little bit longer because they might have to run the ball more.
Absolutely, especially like Ron Rivera knows what he's going to get from Taylor Heineke already. Do they give Sam Howell a little go? Who knows? But just heading back to Kenneth Walker quickly. So it potentially seems to me like the Seahawks have been a little bit cautious with him after obviously with Chris Carson, he had to retire early and things like that. He has got the potential to be very good in the NFL. And I think it was perfect almost as the 1-2 punch with Rashard Penny, who's injury prone and he's gone for the year again, sadly. Do you think Walker will be limited that way with DJ Dallas there the whole year? Or do you think they might even add someone else to the mix? Or what do you think for the rest of the year?
They're not going to add anyone. I definitely don't see him adding anyone. They've still got who have they got to come back? They've still got Travis Homer to come back. So, and they like him a fair bit, and he might even get involved and convolute the situation even more. So the telling part to me was Ken Walker wasn't getting any gains on Rashard Penny before the injury. So if this was a case of Rashard Penny in week 3, week 4, week 5 was getting the early down work, the the short yardage work, and then Ken Walker was getting the share of third down work and the 2-minute drill, I'd go, well, this is just scheme. So I'm not worried. But that didn't happen. So Rashard Penny dominated all the phases. Every time that a running back was required to touch the ball, he got almost exclusively the majority of the work in all the phases of the game. The 2-minute drill, the short yardage, the third down work. He dominated all the snaps in all those areas. Didn't have 100% workload, but he dominated every phase. He was the majority back in all of those phases. And that's not the case with Ken Walker. This could be a case of them bringing him on slowly because he missed camp, he missed time, and they're just building him on slowly. And that could very well be a case. But the fact it's week 6, the fact that this situation has occurred, and the fact he's still not dominating, my gut instinct says that DJ Dallas holds on to a role. And DJ Dallas is someone who could become a thorn in the side of Ken Walker this season. Going forward in Dynasty, very different. I think Ken Walker's got a good outlook. I think there'll be a change in coaching staff and I think philosophies, and then we'll see what happens to Ken Walker. But I'm just, if it was me, me last week was not spending my fab on Ken Walker because I just thought I went out and grabbed a load of DJ Dallas because I just thought we're going to see very similar to what we see in Detroit, where you've got 2 backs. One serves as a majority role, who's going to carry and do the dirty stuff. And the other one is going to get the opportunity roles, the high value touches. And that's kind of where I see the situation right now. Talk to me in a week or two when we've got more data. I might change my mind completely. But right now, DJ Dallas looks like he's gearing towards those high value touches, not Ken Walker. And that says to me that his ceiling is going to be capped.
Let's just quickly talk on another backfield that is very much split. So it seems almost like Cam Akers could be heading out the door at the Rams. I personally don't have any of him. What would you be doing with him? And who do you see going forward? Obviously, you got Darrell Henderson was the clear lead back yesterday, but they've got Kieran Williams, the rookie there. What do you see happening there?
So I think when you look at, there's a couple of different scenario questions in there. What do you do with Cam Akers? Well, you got to hold him. He's not playing for LA again. That ship has gone. Right? He's not going to play another down for the LA Rams. So the question is, does he get traded? And it looks like there's a few good running backs on the block, so it could be hard for him to find a home. But he is on a rookie contract. He's quite inexpensive. You could acquire him pretty cheaply because they know they need him gone. So you're talking about a 5th round pick or later for a cheap rookie deal contract. Maybe this is something Carolina might use as a bridge. Who knows? It could be another team.
Houston.
I think you got to hold him and see what happens. Yeah, I mean, I don't see Houston doing it because I don't think Houston are expecting to do much. But I think there's a few teams that could be interested in getting an additional piece. You look at maybe someone like the Saints or a wild card here. What happens with Kamara? Is he going to get a ban? If so, does he voluntarily take the ban this season because they're not going to make the playoffs? Atlanta, they're short a running back. Maybe they might think, well, we're winning games. Maybe we just spin it up and try and get someone like Akers. There's a few teams here that are sort of in the mix for running backs. And Cam Akers looks a really good risk-free option to a lot of teams. So I think you hold him and you see where he lands. Now, he could land into a really garbage situation. He could land in Tampa and you go, all right, I'm done. I'll cut him. And that could happen. Like it wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility of the Rams, that the Bucs decide that they're going to get another offensive weapon for the sake of it and not use him. I doubt that happens, but that could happen. But I mean, I don't think that happens. But I'm just saying it wouldn't be the biggest shock I've ever seen. And in which case, then Cam Akers doesn't have a role. You can bin him. So I think you got to wait and see where he goes. As for what happens with this backfield, there's a few different areas you got to think about. The first is that, yes, Henderson dominated all the ways that we expect, but there's almost no competition for him on that roster right now. Kyron Williams is the guy they drafted. Kyron Williams is coming back in a week or two after the bye. It will be interesting to see how that dynamic shifts. I would expect Kyron Williams to be the 1B back. I would expect him to get a significant amount of work. When I say significant, I mean that in jest because The Rams don't really run the football. They're the 30th ranked team in rushing yards. 31st in rushing attempts per game in 2022. So even with Kyron Williams maybe getting work, it's still a low volume backfield. I wouldn't really be expecting Kyron Williams to do anything more than be a handcuff. That could be a borderline flex play some weeks. But Henderson at this moment, you can ride him for the next couple of weeks and make the most out of that. But we know Henderson gets hurt. We know he gets injured. But it is a low volume attack. So enjoy it while it lasts, but it will definitely go away. And Henderson is, for me right now, if someone came in for Darrell Henderson, I'm selling him all day long. I'll get what I can because it's a wonderful opportunity because you can sell him right now as well, he's got no competition. He's dominating all the snaps. He's got all the opportunity. There's no one there on the roster that's going to take anything away from him. But in 2 weeks' time, that's not going to be the case. They will bring someone in, or Kyron Williams will get the role. So, I'd sell high on Henderson right now if I could. But it looks like for now he's gonna dominate for the next week or two. So maybe you hold a week and see what happens.
And that's if you don't pick up some sort of injury that sidelines him for a few weeks as well. But let's have a little look at the Jets situation. Elijah Moore didn't get a target yesterday. What's going on there, Murf?
Yeah, so Elijah Moore is someone who's been trending downwards. I've talked about Elijah Moore on this show a few weeks ago, saying it's Garrett Wilson's season. Garrett Wilson's going to be the guy that is taking over, but actually Corey Davis has been a part of that as well, as has Braxton Berrios. And so when you look at Elijah Moore, his target rate is just absolutely through the floor right now, 12.2%. It's the lowest of the four wide receivers on the roster, the top four that you would say. He's only playing about 60% of the snaps. He only played on 14 of 21 possible passing plays. Most of that's in 11 personnel. And it's actually Braxton Berrios that's eating into a share, which is never a good sign. Zach Wilson's used Braxton Berrios reasonably well. We saw this down the stretch last year. Braxton Berrios was actually fantasy relevant down the stretch. So it's not the news that Elijah Moore fans would have wanted. I think you're at the point now in redraft that Elijah Moore is cuttable. I think there's enough players out there that you can rely on to get you points that Elijah Moore is not going to happen. He's behind Wilson, Davis, and Berrios now. Yes, he might have the odd spike week, but you're going to get annoyed trying to chase it. So I think you can cut Elijah Moore. In Dynasty, you've got a whole different problem. I don't know what you do with Elijah Moore in Dynasty because he's worth nothing right now. So if you're going to trade him on pence on the dollar. But the worry is, and I hope this doesn't happen because I really like the player, he's the new Denzel Mims.
And if you want to know what to do with Elijah Moore in Dynasty, send it in to 5 Yard Dynasty for their mailbag for tomorrow night. But DJ Moore, we touched on him earlier a little bit. What do you see happening with him? So obviously Matt Rule got fired and whatever else, but I was really high on him before the season. What is going to be the rest of his year, Murph?
It's a tough one. So I talked about it a few weeks ago saying that actually his usage is going up. And then actually yesterday he had a 33% target share. So you look at the peripherals and think it's actually all going nicely, but only 21 pass attempts. But Moore is now, with Anderson gone, they're not going to bring in anyone else, I don't think. There is a replacement on the roster for Anderson. It'll be next man up. I think it's good news for Anderson, for Moore. I think he gets more work. He needs a quarterback. He needs to have some stability. If you think for DJ Moore, he's been there 4 years, 5 years. He's had a different offensive coordinator pretty much every season. That's not helped. The peripheral numbers are good, like in terms of target share. The volume's not quite been there. Two things need to happen for DJ Moore to be more fantasy relevant than he is right now. One, they've got to run more plays. 42 plays they ran yesterday, not going to cut it. They need to be running, as I said before, they need to be running close to 60, 65 plays. That's kind of what we need Carolina offense to do. if Christian McCaffrey goes off this roster, then it really is the Elijah Moore show. The DJ Moore show. I've got Elijah Moore in my head. Everything shoots up. So right now, DJ Moore's a good hold because it should all fall into place. I don't see him leaving this roster. I do think he's there for the rest of the season. And I think as a result, you're looking at him thinking, if CMC goes, Anderson's gone, there's not a whole lot of competition. But there's enough competition, say, in Terrence Marshall Jr. to run decoys to take that threat away, and someone who will therefore, we won't get this Christian Kirk scenario. You will be able to get some usage out of him, but we need Baker Mayfield back. And as much as that pains me to say it, to get some efficiency out of there, or we need Sam Darnold. We need someone who could throw the football consistently in the right area for DJ Moore to flourish. But the rest of the usage and the peripheral numbers are pretty good. We just need a bit of consistency at the quarterback position. And if we get that, Moore is a top 40 player. I mean, unfortunately, you're not going to get the value that you return or what you drafted him in the 5th round. He's not going to return that. But he will have top 24 weeks purely on those. He'll have those sort of 8, 10, 12 catch games. But it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, that's a sad one for me because I was extremely high on him, especially in running back heavy starts to my drafts. It's bit me, but it is what it is. That's another one that I may have moved the other way on too early because he was one of my favorite rookies coming out, and I think I sold dropped even, not even moved him anywhere far too early in redraft leagues where I've had a bad start. Is Alec Pierce. The last few weeks he's been there for Matt Ryan, hasn't he?
Yeah, not so much this week. This is more to alleviate concerns. Paris Campbell had a huge day, 11 targets, 7 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. But listen, as I said, Matt Ryan threw the ball 58 times yesterday. That's not going to happen every week. Alec Pierce is definitely the wide receiver 2 on this team. And he is, for me, wide receiver 3 range for the rest of the season as a top 36 player. There's good numbers, there's good usage. He's not going to stick at that 12% target share. He's going to be upwards of that sort of 18 to 22% target share is what I would expect him to be for the rest of the season. It's good to see the Colts offense starting to stimulate and get some life in it. I think once JT comes back and they have a bit of balance to this offense, I think that helps Pierce, not hurt him. It's one of those weird scenarios that actually less passing volume helps him because of where he is in the depth chart. So I think, and game script is important. They're not going to be behind two touchdowns early that often. And I think, when they're trying to control games, they'll control it through Alec Pierce and Pittman. They'll use them as a balance. So expect good things from Pierce going forward. Like I said, there's a wide receiver 3 play for the rest of the season.
Yeah, it was a rough start for the Colts this year, and anyone on their roster that you had in fantasy. But let's talk about one of your boys, Rachaad White.
Yeah. So White, I've been telling all season he's not a thing, and then people got really excited by his cameo in week 4. You just need to cut him off your roster if you're in redraft. They just don't run the football enough, especially after first down. So the Buccaneers have only run the ball 127 times this season. That's ranked them 29th in the NFL. 58% of that has been on first down. And that's where Fournette eats, it's Fournette territory. So 74 of those 127 attempts have been on first down. 31 attempts, so further 24% have been on second down. So almost exclusively, you're talking about 105 of 127 attempts have been dominated in the Leonard Fournette area. So it leaves just 18 rushes on third down, which just isn't a high enough sustainable role for Rachaad White. And he'll get a few receptions here and there, but the bottom line is he's not going to get enough volume in this offense to be fantasy relevant. Might have the odd spike week like you saw in KC, where they just throw a load of balls and just see what happens. But for me, he's droppable in. But I do think he's a hold in Dynasty because I think next year you might see something very different. But the problem is that the Buccaneers just aren't very good at running the football. They kind of just run it on first down and they just kind of abandon it far too frequently. And this is a team that had the fewest offensive rushing plays in 2021. So we shouldn't be overly shocked by this, but it has an impact on the receivers because what happens now is as we talk about coaching, it's kind of been the theme of this podcast. When you look at the coaching of the Buccaneers, it's too predictable. You know they're going to run the ball on first down. You know they're going to pass the ball on third down, and second down is all down to usage. And basically, the Steelers they knew exactly what the Buccaneers were doing, and so Brady had one of his lowest career passing completion games because the Steelers just knew. They just knew what it was almost like they knew the playbook. They knew exactly what play was going to go on. Where the Buccaneers are struggling right now is they need a red zone threat outside of Mike Evans. And this is where Gronk has gone, and it's such a big loss. They need someone to dominate the red zone. So if you drafted Mike Evans in the third round, you expected him to get, and I've said this many times, a 10 touchdown kind of season. You kind of write that in pen. That's what he does. But he's not getting enough red zone targets. You'd be surprised to know that Russell Gage is the leading Bucs receiver with red zone targets with 7, and then Fournette and Evans have 6. Brait has 5, but he's not caught any. K. Dotton has 3 targets. He's only caught 1 of those. So they need a tight end. Don't be too surprised if the Buccaneers in the trade deadline go for a tight end. I don't know who. I have no inside knowledge, but they need a big guy to throw the ball. It's what Brady needs. It's what this offense needs. They're not efficient in the red zone. Very, very poor red zone offense this season. And I think once they've got that, that will bring into play Evans more because they'll have to defend the tight end, the big tight end. And that will mean that Evans should get more work in that red zone. And you start to see those targets go back up in his favor. So, it's a big concern right now for the Buccaneers, and for if you're holding this offense in fantasy football. I was very in on them. I've got them on a lot of teams. Fournette's going to deliver what we expected him to. He's currently the RB5. Expect him to finish there. Gage hasn't quite been as good as we thought he would be, but he hasn't been terrible. And Godwin is delivering above expectation. It's really just Evans that's been the biggest disappointment, as well as also Brady. So they need some help. And it should come in the coming weeks, but just expect them to be busy at the trade deadline. I expect them to push all in.
Yeah, absolutely. And heading towards the close a little bit, let's have a little look at some players that are potentially injured or different situations we need to monitor. So you've obviously got, it looks like Tua, Dak Prescott, Mac Jones all could return this week. What are we saying about Jonathan Taylor? What do you think with him, Murf? Do you see him being back in week 7 or?
Yeah, I mean, I'd expect him to be back. I think he was pretty close to going this week. It just was ruled out the day before. So, and it was a short week. I think if it was a Sunday, it would be likely that he would go. So, but then I said that about Keenan Allen. I've been wrong the last 3 weeks. So, what do I know? But yeah, I hope he's a go for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael Thomas is missing time again. You mentioned Hollywood Brown earlier in the show, potential season-ending injury on his foot. Randall Cobb got peppered with targets in London by Aaron Rodgers. He's dealing with an ankle issue. There's loads. You cover it towards the end of the week in your matchup show anyway. All sort of injuries across all the different teams and who's playing who. So do I, and with Robin Pitsy on Fast Action Friday. But I think that we are pretty close now, mate.
Oh, I think your internet's gone, mate. Sorry, it cut out there.
Hello?
Yeah, I've got you now.
Sorry, I mentioned... go on, carry on.
No, I was just saying that, your internet cut out there, but you mentioned that we're near the end, I guess.
Yeah, and I says about where you can get updated on injuries later in the week. You cover them in your matchups pod on a Friday, and so do we at Fast Action Friday at 6 o'clock.
Yep, and you also do the injury files every week, don't you, on 5 Yard Rush? So make sure you check that out on there. And you got Lewis's handle on the bottom of the screen there at Venes1, so you can catch him there. Thanks very much for joining me, mate, and breaking down week 6. Anything else you want to plug while you're here?
No, that is about it, mate. I think, Thursday morning, the injury files will be out.
Yeah, so definitely tune in to the site and do that. I'm going to drop something on running backs in fantasy football over the last decade for the site. I'll be dropping that probably Friday. There'll be a sneak peek on the Patreon, I hope Wednesday. At least I'll share some of the research from that. So if you've not been part of the Patreon and you wonder what it's all about, you can sign up at patreon.com /5 Yard Rush. What do you get? If you pay anything over £3 a month, you get merch, but also you get access to the exclusive WhatsApp channel. And it's a good community of people in the WhatsApp channel. Yes, it's WhatsApp. It's not Discord, because you get access to me and my brain and my thoughts. And someone in the Patreon, and I'm going to quote it directly, said, let me find the exact quote. Was the best investment I make every month being on this Patreon. Stick that on your sales brochure. Don't have a sales brochure, do have a podcast. Wardy, I've put it on here. So, yes. And he's referring to that because he was stuck with a start-sit decision on, I think it was D's. And I told him, Lewis, to start your Vikings D over the Packers D. And he was delighted with that. So I think it got him a win. I hope so. So that's what you get. You get, because I keep saying this over and over again. I get about anywhere in the region of about 40 to 200 start sit or some form of questions on my Twitter DMs. I don't answer all of them. Some people get annoyed I don't answer them. Honestly, I don't care. And the reason I don't care is because we put out all this content. You do, I do, all the writers here at 5 Yard Rush. The amount of people that ask me, would I start A over B? And it's like, well, they put rankings up every week. You just set the scoring format and then you can pick. You can just see. You don't need to. There's so many questions like that. So many questions don't have context. And it's not the fact I don't want to help. If people have a genuine question and it's about strategy or it's about a philosophy or about improving a team, then, I'm all for it. It's just like, would I start at player A over player B? They don't teach you anything. It's that information's available. As you said, we do the matchups pod. We do so many different resources to it. All that information is covered, which says to me, either you're not reading it or you're just not really that into it. And you're just being, what's the quickest available answer? The Patreon, I will answer questions pretty quickly and I will answer them all the way up to kickoff, which I won't do on Twitter. Basically, after about 1 o'clock on the Sunday, I won't look at Twitter. I just don't. I'm too busy doing my lineups, my rankings, spending time with my family. So I don't look. So people send me questions at like 5 to 6, and then they wonder why I don't get an answer. I don't look. I don't look past 1 o'clock. So if you do want access to me, Patreon's the way to do it. It's really cheap. It's a few pounds a month. It's not even the price for coffee now. So you can get access to that there. But yes, Lewis, thank you very much for stepping in. Dan, love you, brother. Hope your internet is up and running. He's living in the 19th century. Maybe we can blame this flip-flop Tory government on his internet. Maybe we can't. Who knows what we can and can't blame anymore on the government. All I know is that I'm going to. And until that message goes out to everybody, thank you very much for joining us this week. Look forward to catching you all later on in the week. Waiver Wire will drop tomorrow. Go check out Stacey's column. That's up live on the site now. And until next week, as always, don't forget, keep brushing.